Welcome to our first Learn at Lunch for 2024. Couple of housekeeping things, but before we do that, I'd like to open the meeting, of course, by paying our respects to our traditional owners of the lands that we're meeting on today, the Awabakal people for HMRI, and of course for people online, welcome, and I pay my respects to the traditional owners of the lands on which you're sitting on today. Acknowledge that this is Aboriginal land and it always was and always will be. We're doing a Learn at Lunch today, talking about Prof's pearls of productivity. Whether or not I follow everything that I'm presenting today is one thing, but I think the ideas are very valid. So, and I try to actually, but you know, we're not always as successful as we'd like to be at everything. So also I'd like to welcome the online audience today. And without anything further, I will just commence with Prof's pearls for productivity. We all know I like my pearls. And I'm going to really break this presentation down into 3 different pillars. And these are things I think about when I'm thinking about how to get the most out of myself and also out of a team. The first thing is around balancing, and that might mean what you're thinking it might mean, but it might mean something else. And we'll go through a couple of things I mean within this pillar. There's then the thinking and the doing. So we'll talk about each of these different components. Now, the first is balancing. So I think here you've got to, when people say balancing, they often think of work-life balance. That's a given. I'm not really talking about that now. I'm talking about weighing up what's my work, okay? What is my purpose and why am I here? And that is really your primary work. You're also here for other reasons. So you're here to support your colleagues and your collaborators. You're here to do strategic stuff to make you productive. And then there's also the work that you faff about with. And, you know, you might need to do that faffing, but it might not be the most important thing in your day. And if you balance your time where you kind of got all your faffing and your strategic stuff and your supporting work, weighing your scales down and very little for your primary work, you're not going to be productive. You might be an excellent collaborator, but you're not going to be productive in what your purpose is. So I think a really good piece of advice is to keep that front of mind. Why am I here? What is my purpose in my role? And how am I balancing things in terms of getting the correct level of balance? And, you know, some of the things like the faffing and organising and things, they might be easy things to do. So we might invest more time in them because we'll get them off the plate and that will feel like we're being productive. But then we procrastinate on the things that are really important. So get that clear in your head, I think, is one of the first kind of tips in terms of developing your productivity. Because this is not what you want to see. You don't want to see this pile up of your work, your faffing and your strategic stuff. And when I say strategic stuff, I was trying to think, what's the right term for that? I don't mean the strategic big picture stuff, which is important. I just mean, you know, you're strategic by creating organisational systems within the work that you do. But if you spend all your time doing that, then it's not going to kind of aid you in productivity. So you want your primary work to be the pile of the bigger volume of things and all the other things to be the smaller pile. So really have that reversed. So I think that's one thing that you can do to actually think, all right, if I'm just getting started on this, I'm feeling overwhelmed, I'm feeling like I've got too much to do, I've overcommitted myself. What is my purpose? And sit down and draw it. And I did this with someone the other day during a mentor session, and the picture's still on my whiteboard where we actually sat and weighed things up. And I don't know if that person would like to volunteer, whether or not that was a helpful exercise, but it's certainly something I find as helpful. The other thing that you need to balance is opportunity. So in the room here, we have emerging researchers and researchers that might be midway through their career. I can't see too many seniors. But when you're like an E, an MCR, and even a senior researcher, you tend to be presented with opportunities that might be good for your career. You'll be presented with opportunities that might not be as good for your career, but you're being presented with them because people know you're good at stuff, people know you get things done, so they'll keep coming back asking you to do stuff. You need to be able to balance this effectively. You need to be able to understand when you say yes and when you say no. And I would say everyone's been in a situation where they're presented with an opportunity and they think, should I do this? Should I do this? I know I don't have time, but I think it's really good for me. What will I do? So how do you know whether to say yes or whether to say no? I think you should ask yourself a number of questions. Ask yourself, how will this affect your career? So is this going to actually be a fantastic opportunity for me that I can't miss? Or am I going to be like a junior person on this that gets all the work and it takes up all of that primary work time, but it's not necessarily going to give me a primary output? Or, you know, I might be middle author on something that might be really big, so therefore it might be worth your while, or not that big. So weigh that up. How big of an impact will this have on my career? How will it affect my well-being? So if I take this on, am I going to be working at home on weekends, every weekend, for something that really isn't related to my career trajectory, but related to someone else's? And that's going to mean it's eating up all that productivity time for you, and also potentially making you a little bit resentful. So I think, you know, there are often opportunities to come up like this. So you have to do this weighing up again in terms of what I say yes to, what I say no to, and those questions can help you. How does it affect my balance? My work-life balance, which is a given, but also my balance in terms of my little balls, and my balance in terms of the general kind of setting of my work. And finally, how does it affect, this is really important, what can I remove in order to add? So if you think about this a lot, because otherwise you'll end up getting opportunities presented, you'll be enthusiastic, you won't want to say no, you won't want to miss out, and you'll be saying yes, 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 but then you'll find you've got all these things and you're thinking, oh God, I can't manage it. I'm speaking from experience. So you have to actually think, all right, if I'm going to take on this opportunity, what will I let go of in order to create that positive kind of environment for me to be productive? So these decisions can be hard, and often you worry about whether you've made the right decision, or whether you kind of just enthusiastically have said yes, or whether you recognise, okay, I've got no room for this, I have to say no, but then you've missed the greatest opportunity of your career. So how do you actually make informed decisions around this? And I recommend that each of you seek out a mentor, and the mentor can help you in terms of making these decisions. You might want to go along and say, oh, you know, I got asked to do this and it sounds really good, but I'm really busy. What do I do? And you want a mentor that can say to you, you have to say yes, or this isn't going to be right for you. They might not be 100% right, but they're going to give you an honest assessment from someone who has experience and someone who kind of may have been there. So can I just see from the audience, does anyone in the room have a mentor? 1, 2, 3. So not many? I'd say I do. There might have been 4 or 5 people in the room. That person that you seek out to help you with this and help you with, you know, opportunities to improve your career and your productivity doesn't have to be within your field. They could be someone that's completely outside of it, but they just, you know the pathway that you're on and can help you with that. So do think about this. And, you know, if anyone needs some support in finding a mentor, we can certainly help you do that through the program. Next, I want to talk about thinking. Academia was a place where thinking was something that people did very often. I'm finding that that's becoming less and less so because of the way that workloads have developed, that there isn't often a lot of opportunity for thinking, or there isn't as much opportunity for thinking that there needs to be in order to create the creativity and productivity that we want. We have to be able to create thinking space within our work environment. And it's incredibly important because it relates, as I said, to how productive and creative we can be in a research space. I'm going to talk about this model of creativity because I read this in a book when I was off on my camper van trip on long service leave. And I found this book before I left, and it's called Time Off. And it is one of the most amazing books I've ever read. I loved it. There's lots of kind of stories, case studies, anecdotes, and things like that. I'm going to pop it in the book nook. So if anyone else wants an opportunity to get the joy that I got from it, please actually go and pick it up. But in that book, the authors talk about this model from Graham Wallace, who he published this model of creativity in 1926 in The Art of Thought. And it's a model of creativity that actually has stood the test of time. It's almost 100 years old, and it's just as relevant today as it was when he published it. And he says that there are 4 phases to creativity. And I've popped it in this productivity talk because I think you need these phases in order to be productive with your idea generation and your development of research. So those phases are preparation, incubation, illumination, and verification. Has anybody heard of it before? Yep. So the first phase is the preparation. Now, this is kind of the deep work that you do in terms of, you can apply this to any project. You can apply it to writing a paper. You can apply it to designing a new study, an RCT, a laboratory method, a presentation, anything. And I actually applied this to today's presentation in that I did a lot of thinking about what I was going to talk about and how I was going to put it all together. It's where you examine the problem from all angles. You look at activities, examine the problem from all angles, and then the activities are performed in a state free of distraction that push your cognitive capabilities to the limit. So it enables us to create new value, to improve our skill. So it's the preparation work that we do where if we're writing a review article, for example, we might be reviewing all the papers, reading all the papers and things like that, preparing what we want to kind of structure the paper like, for example. But it's not actually going to end in that paper being written, is it? So it doesn't necessarily lead to the desired solution yet, but it makes the desired solution obtainable. And I know I used to kind of walk to work when I was in Manchester, and it was a reasonable walk. And, go to the office and you'd kind of do work where you're kind of looking at like literature and evidence and then looking at the data and then kind of thinking about how that study kind of resulted and stuff like that. And then I'd walk home. And as I'd walk home, all these ideas for a paper were kind of popping into my head. And I'd actually even then get out my little voice memos on my iPhone and walking along, dictating the paper and things like that. Because I do this deep thinking at work, and then I would go to the next stage, which is the incubation stage. And when you're incubating, you're actually immersing yourself in something different. So for me, it was walking around a new city, checking out all the kind of new things and stimulus and things like that kind of excited me and took my mind off everything else. But then I was getting these illuminations as it was happening. But with the incubation, you kind of immerse yourself into something other than the actual problem. And that might be going for a walk, a hike, having a nap, or it could be kind of doing deep work on another problem. And then what it does is enables your subconsciousness to do the work. So the deep work is related to your consciousness of really kind of getting into that work. And now the subconscious takes over to allow all the work you've done to incubate. What happens next? Aha, the aha moment, the light bulb moment, the eureka. So then, you've done the deep work, you've done the incubation, and now things just flow through freely. Has anyone had that experience where you kind of think, oh, wow, now, I've sat down, like I've done this and I've thought of this and I've done this and now I'm going to sit down and now just words just go blah, because you've put the work into it. And what I always say to my students is when you're writing, for example, split your writing or split your thinking from your writing. Don't sit down and think, okay, I'm going to write a paper now. It just doesn't work. You sit at a screen, you feel blocked, nothing comes out. But if you spend your time on all of that thinking and then sit down, it flows freely. And I have a quote here from Bertrand Russell. Now, he was a mathematician, a philosopher, and he also was a Nobel laureate, but his Nobel Prize was in literature. So he's a pretty bit of an all-rounder kind of guy. And, he says in his praise of idleness, and I think idleness is also really important for productivity, and I'll talk about that. But everyone who has done any creative work has experienced, in a greater or less degree, the state of mind in which, after long labour, truth and beauty appears, or seems to appear in a sudden glory. It may only be about some small matter, or it may be about the universe. And I think that the best creative work in art, science, literature, and in philosophy has been the result of such a moment. So that's the aha moment. And in order to get to that, it really does require those other phases of this creative process. And the reason I'm really reinforcing that is because we're at a stage where everyone's diaries are full. Everyone's kind of got a busy environment in which they're working. If we allow that to happen, we don't get those opportunities for incubation and illumination. And that's not going to help your research career in any way. So this is a priority that you must build into your work balance, okay? The next stage is verification. And this is really then about the validity of the idea or testing it, or it might be, you know, the trial that you've developed, you'll go off and then test all your hypotheses and things like that. So that's where the validation and the verification comes in. All right. So I've mentioned this a little bit already, but I know from personal experience, I often feel a bit like this, a bit overwhelmed with thousands of things going on in my mind, and many, many deadlines that I feel overwhelmed about and have difficulty in getting to. And what I learned is that time off and generating a rest ethic is highly important to managing this. So a rest ethic will increase your productivity. Read the book. And since I went on long service leave 2 years ago, I now probably every 3 months have what I call my little mini breaks, where I'll have a few days off. I'll book a place that's kind of away in nature, and I just go off and kind of sit and look at animals or waves, or do some yoga, do some things that are just really nurturing my well-being. So that's one strategy that I use. But another strategy is also around, if you're tired, rest. And I know that seems blindly obvious, but that wasn't something I learned until reasonably late in my life, like now. So we often just push ourselves, and it's not going to help you at all. So the rest is highly important, and you have to build a rest ethics. There are lots of philosophers that have kind of really focused on this, way back to the day of Aristotle, where he promoted the kind of concept or the philosophy of noble leisure. So having leisure time that was for purpose. There are others. Ovid was a big fan of rest. And one of his quotes is, "What is without periods of rest will not endure." You got a long career ahead of you. You have to actually make sure this is part of your life. So how do we do that? How do we get things done now that I've talked about the highly important principles in terms of improving your productivity? We can have to-do lists. And, you know, the to-do lists might make you overwhelmed, might make you feel paralysed because there's so much on the list, you don't know where to start. You might start multitasking, and multitasking in an inefficient way, so nothing really gets done. You just got a lot of things happening at once. So you need systems to prevent this, and systems to create order in your work life, in your home life, or whatever it might be. I use these systems not only at work, but in my whole life, like for all of the different aspects. And what I've done is I've pulled out a couple of examples, certainly not all by any measure, but a couple of examples which I've tried and tested and feel are effective. The first one is Kanban. Now, this is actually fairly new to me, but I'm really enjoying it. Kanban is a Japanese word that means signboard. And this was developed in 1950 by a Toyota executive by the name of Tachi Ono. So what it is it's really these 3 columns, and you can do this on paper, in a diary. If you walk past my office, you see on a whiteboard, you'll see I've done it on the glass. Like there's little coloured Post-it notes on the glass that keep on moving around. So this is my Kanban. And the 3 columns that you have is your to-do list, your doing, and your done. So I used to have a to-do list, which would end up being really long. And then I'd get that feeling of overwhelm and paralysis in terms of, okay, where do I begin? But now on my to-do list are the things that I have to do. On the doing list are the things that might be my priorities that I'm doing right now. And once I've done them, I move the sticky note to the done, and I move something from to do to doing. Now, that's such a simple concept, but it creates a way for you to visualize the task, structure them, and then complete them in stages. You've got your done, so you feel a sense of accomplishment because, you know, you can see them moving along. And actually, even today, someone said to me, oh, look at yours moving along. So I find that very helpful. There are some key, or particularly one key aspect to this. Does anyone want to hazard a guess of what that might be in terms of making sure this works for you from a productive perspective? Will it matter how much is on your to-do list? No. It is prioritising, but it's avoiding the overwhelm as well. So the key is to have a work in progress limit. Okay, so that middle column should not be long. There should not be a whole load of tasks on that middle column because that's what you're currently working on. You can't do a whole load of things all at once. So limit it to no more than 3. I was guilty this week. I had, I think, 5 on my doing column, but some were smaller and some were larger, but they all had to be done. And now I think I've got 5 on my done column, which makes me feel really good about myself. So that's one strategy. This is another strategy which I don't use. I've tried. It doesn't work for me. So, you know, I toss it, but it might work for you. And this is the Eisenhower matrix. So this was named after President Eisenhower, who famously said in a speech that he has 2 kinds of problems, the urgent and the important. The urgent are not important and the important are never urgent. And I think that's a really wise thing because so this has kind of then developed this little matrix which has 4 little quadrants. There's the urgent, the non-urgent, the not important and urgent, the not important and not urgent, the urgent and important, and the not urgent and important. So what goes into these quadrants? If it's urgent and important, they have to get done, okay? You don't have a choice in those things. These are things with clear deadlines, your NH and MRC grant. You know, you're not going to argue that it's not urgent and it's not important, so you do it, okay? That's your priority. You've got important and not urgent work. Now, this is what they call the sweet spot in this quadrant because you have to make room for this. So these are things that really allow you to meet your goals. So they might be things like writing that paper that doesn't have a deadline but would be really important if you get it submitted. You might keep pushing it back because of this urgent and important box. You might keep putting it back because of the urgent and not important box, or even the not urgent and not important box. You've got to try and make sure the majority of your work fits into that sweet spot. And that is a little bit like those weighing up kind of the different components of your work and where they fit. The delegated, the not important and urgent, you might be able to delegate to someone else. And then there are things that are not important and not urgent. You might just delete it and get rid of it and not spend your time on it. But you have to kind of work out what things fit into that box. So that might be a strategy that works for some. One thing I really like is the MIT. So has anyone heard of a MIT? I often talk about MITs, which are the most important tasks. So this is a very simple approach where you might sit down in the morning and say to yourself, or the night before even, actually, what are the 2 to 3 most important things that I need to do today? Where are the things that, or what are the things that if I get them done, that would make a huge difference? So write those most important things on your most important task list, and then try and get them done when you're most productive. If that's first thing in the morning, do it then. They recommend first thing in the morning, but that might not be the time of day that works for you. Trying to do it first thing in the morning means that it's more likely to get done, because if you don't finish it, you've still got the afternoon. If you leave it till night, then it's, less likely to get done. So the morning is beneficial in that respect. And then take these most important tasks off your to-do list onto their own MIT list, so that you can then kind of prioritize those, similar to the upper quadrant in the Eisenhower matrix. So that's another strategy. Another one, which is one of my favorites for work and life in general, is bullet journaling. Does anyone know about bullet journals? Yes and no's I'm getting. So often when you think about a bullet journal, you might think about all these pretty little books with stickers and fancy fonts and things like that. That's not the origin of a bullet journal. The origin of a bullet journal came from a guy called Ryder Carroll, who has ADHD and had ADHD as a child. And in school and class, he'd find he really kind of wasn't able to keep up and wasn't able to stay on task, and just felt that he was falling behind because of the symptoms that he experienced from his ADHD. So he developed a system that worked for him, and he really refers to it as an analog productivity tool in a digital world. So you can get digital bullet journals now, but most are actually an analog version of a diary that you carry around with you. And there are many different things that you can put in these bullet journals. You can have a daily log, a monthly log, a collection which might relate to what you're doing while you're working on a grant. It might be, a list of organising a holiday. It might be a list of kind of publications that you're working on and things like that. So you have diaries, but you also have collections. And you have these little strategies for how you actually move things around on your day-to-day logs. So you have tasks waiting to be actioned, tasks completed, tasks that you might not have got done on the Tuesday, so you've got to migrate that to the Wednesday, or it's not that important, you might migrate it to next Monday, whatever. And then tasks that have been scheduled for a specific week, events and notes. I can't talk about the whole methodology of the bullet journaling, but this book does. And again, it's a book that I've really enjoyed reading. I started bullet journaling back in 2019, and I felt that it really changed my approach to organisation and productivity. So if you think that that's something that might work for you, go to the Book Nook and you can find my version. And I've got some examples of some of the things here from, I can't read it, but we've got migration collections, rapid logging, future logs, monthly logs, and daily logs. And, you know, that's from this book here. You can see how that works. So that's another strategy that you might think about. Here's another example of someone else kind of using it. You can see that these are their days. They've crossed off their tasks. But down here, this one they didn't get done, so they've moved it to another day. You can tell by the little arrow, and maybe they just haven't addressed these things. So the final thing I guess I want to talk about from a, no, it's not the final thing, but next thing I want to talk about is another little book in my bag of tricks, which is James Clear's Atomic Habits. So this is a reasonably new book, actually. I think maybe the last year or two it's been a bestseller. And it talks about essentially consistency and persistence. So these two things being highly important to making small changes which lead to major impacts. So the Atomic Habits is the 1% principle. And this is where improving by just 1% every day can lead to significant results over time. So it's like a marginal gains theory, which they use in cycling. And it underscores the importance of consistency and persistence. So creating habits which you stick to, and they don't have to be big habits. They could just be, you know, a daily thing where today I'll walk to work, you know, and that's oversimplifying it. But it's a really another nice book to think about in terms of trying to improve your productivity. It doesn't only relate to what you do at work, but really making changes in your life in general that are sustainable. So that's another recommendation. Now, tomatoes. How can we use tomatoes for productivity? So who's heard of the Pomodoro method? Yep. So the Pomodoro method is a popular time management tool where you're asked to kind of work over alternate Pomodoro sessions, which are 25-minute work sessions, then have a break. During that 25-minute work session, you have to have very focused work, and going back to that deep thinking and that deep work that I talked about earlier. You have frequent short breaks, and that promotes sustained concentration so that you don't fatigue. So you might have a Pomodoro where you do 20, well, first of all, you set your task, you work out what you're going to do in that 25 minutes. You do 25 minutes of work, you have a timer, you then have a quick break, then you get back in, do another 25 minutes. And most of these things are like a 4 period slot of 25-minute intense work, intense focused work. So you might do this for, one Pomodoro a day, and you might set the task that you're going to do for the Pomodoro to writing. If you find you're not a snacker when it comes to writing, you need like a whole day to kind of deeply get into that. And I would put myself in that category. Using this method, even if you are one of those kind of give me a whole day to write people, yeah, it's very productive. So shut up and write sessions have been proposed, are used to do these Pomodoro techniques. And this is really good for academic writing to get words on a page. So what you do is you kind of go in, and it might be in a room like this, it might be on Zoom because you do it as groups. And you go in and you might check in with everyone. Today I'm going to write the discussion on my the current paper that I'm writing. So, and then Erin's going to write the method section for her paper, and Eleanor's going to write the results. So you all check in and articulate with each other what you're going to do. Then the timer goes on. Email notifications are turned off. Phones are put away. Any distraction turned off. And you write for 25 minutes. Timer goes off. You have a break. You have a stretch. You might want to, have a look at something that's happened during that time. And then you get back into the 25 minutes of deep, focused work. Timer off, then another 25, timer off, another 25. These are far more productive than you might expect. I was very skeptical when I started to do these when the school introduced them, thinking, oh gosh, it's not going to get anything done. It's 25 minutes. What can you do in that time? But every time I do one, I'm surprised at how much I achieve. And because of that, we're actually going to start some asthma and breathing shut up and writes. So Olivia is organising them. She's been advertising, letting people know that they're coming. And once they've been planned, she'll pop them in everybody's diary within the program. And then please give them a go. If they don't work for you, fine. But if, you come along and think, oh, geez, this does work, then we'll see how it goes. How about that? Okay. All right. Now, so that's really all I wanted to say about different strategies. I do want to just kind of draw your attention to the little asthma and breathing book nook that, again, Olivia's created downstairs. I've donated, I've placed a number of books down there, which will be helpful. I like to go back to books over and over. So if you do borrow one, please bring it back, because other people will benefit from it, and also I'll go back and forth to them all the time. I've highlighted a few books for you now, and then I've just got another one, a little book I picked up in an airport one day, which is the Get Things Done book. So it talks about a number of the different methods that I've presented today as well. And it's quite a cute little read. So to conclude, I guess, what's important in terms of trying to really progress your productivity? There is the balance, where we're thinking about balance from multiple perspectives, work-life balance, but the types of work that are balanced in the right direction, the opportunities are balanced in the right direction. And for those directions, it's not necessarily a balance, but an imbalance of your primary work, your most important tasks, your, number one jobs, whatever your urgence and your importance and non-urgence. That's where you kind of want the balance to be ticked. Think of a strategy or a productivity tool that you try out and that works for you. If it doesn't work for you, try something else. I think mentors are also helpful in terms of getting these strategies right. But finally, I think one of the most important things is, yes, we have work, but we also have to have rest and play. And that is essential to your ability to be productive. So that's all I've got to share with you today.